So, you want to add audio to your game. Great. But first of all, you should know why to do so. Adding audio to your game makes it more interactive by allowing for a feedback to the player and thus bringing life to the game. But how does an audio system in general work? An audio system consists of two main components, a source and a listener. And the closer your listener gets to the source, the higher the sound will be. So if the sound is coming from the right direction, you will hear it coming from your right speaker and not the left one. And that's what's called a stereo sound. In Unity, it's almost the same. We have a sound source and a listener. The main difference is that you want to be hearing the voices from the place of your character in the game world. So you want to have the listener added to the player. However, that will not be the case, and I will tell you why in a moment. So here we have a player and a coin. When having no feedback, when the coin is collected, you feel that this is not right. However, when adding the sound effects, you immediately notice that it became more fun to collect the coin, although we didn't change anything else. Now, why did I tell you that we don't add the listener to the player? I mean, of course you can if you want to, but in that case it will not hear the sounds coming from the UI elements in the canvas. This is because of the canvas being an overlay on top of the game world and not a part of it. So the solution to that is by adding the listener to the camera. And as in almost every single game the camera is always following the player, you will not notice much of a difference. Now we're done with the illustration part, so let's jump into Unity and see how to introduce sound to the game. We'll start by creating an empty game object, and we will call this game object Audio Manager. Now we will reset its transform. Now we will create a C# script, and it will also be called Audio Manager. After that we will create another C# script, but this time it will be called Sound. Now for the sound script, we will delete both of the update and start function as we will not be using them. We will also need to delete the mono behavior. And finally, we will delete both of the using system and using system.collection. Instead, we will type using unityengine.audio. This is the library you use whenever you're dealing with audio files in Unity. After that, we'll declare a public string, and this string will be called name, followed by a public audio clip, which we'll call clip. Then another public bool, which we will call loop. After that, a public float called volume. Then a public game object called source. And finally, a public audio source, and we will call this audio source. Even though the audio source will be a public, we don't want this to be shown in the inspector. In this case, we will use an attribute called hide in inspector. For the volume, it will be better if we set it to a slider ranging from values from 0 to 1. To do so, we will use an attribute called range, and we will give it both of the minimum value and the maximum value. However, if we save the script like that, it will not be shown in the inspector. To be able to show it in the inspector, we will use an attribute over the class, and this attribute will be system.serializable. Now we're done with the sound script, and it's time to work on our audio manager. We'll start by removing both of those libraries, and instead we'll be using the system library and unityengine.audio. Now we'll declare a public variable of type sound. We will make it an array and we will call it sounds. We'll change the start function from start to awake. It will be the same, but the main difference is that awake is called before the start function. Here we want to assign each sound of the game to its corresponding game object. So we will use for each sound of name S in our sounds array and we will set s.audioSource equal to s.source.gameObject.addComponent, and that component will be of type audioSource. Then we will set the s.audioSource.volume to be equal to s.volume. And we will do the same for the clip, the name, and the loop options. Now we will remove the update function as we will not use it. And instead we'll create a public function called play. This function will be taking a string called name. Inside this function, we want our sound of name S to be equal to array.find, and we will be searching in the sounds array for a sound which name is equal to the name variable. And when we find this sound, we will need to set s.audioSource.play. Now we will duplicate the same function, but instead of play, we want it to be pause. Once we're back in Unity, we want to add the Audio Manager script to the Audio Manager game object. And then we will need to change the size to be equivalent to the number of tracks we will be using. Then we will need to assign a name, a clip, and the source to each of our tracks. Don't forget to change the volume to its required setting. Now you will notice that for the audio pickup sound, I changed the source to not be the coin itself, however it will be the character. That's because whenever the character picks up the coin will be destroyed. Consequently, its audio source will also be destroyed and the sound will not be played. And since the character will not be destroyed and it will be in the same spot as the coin when he picks it up, so we can assign the audio source to it. Now the final step is to call the play function from each position in the code. To do so, we will type find game object of type, and that type will be Audio Manager. And then we will call the play function, and we will give it the name of our track. But be sure that this track has to be the exact spelling in case as the name you typed in the Audio Manager inspector. And to stop the sound it will be the same, but this will be with the pause function, not the play one. However, for the walking, you can see that I declared a new variable of type bool. And that's to check if the sound is already playing. We don't want it to start again. So we don't want the sound to be overlapping with each other. So we will check that if playing is false before we trigger the sound, and if so we can trigger it, and then change playing to be true. And when the player stops, we will need to set our playing variable back to false. Now save the script, return back to Unity, and you'll find that everything is working perfectly. Thank you for watching till the end of the video. If you learned something new today, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to leave them in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. This is the Gamesmith, and as usual, see you in the next one.